The mystery over the alien attacks in Peru deepened when it's discovered that the US conducted military exercises at the same time that the attacks occurred. An interview with someone who knew Philip Corso, the famous whistleblower, personally, understanding special access programs, Exopolitics Courses begin, a David Grusch hitpiece comes out designed to warn off other whistleblowers about coming forward. Robert Kennedy again points out the CIA was involved in the assassination of his uncle, and spacetime portals. Are they used for interstellar travel and even taking airplanes out of flight?
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
This week's edition of Exopolitics Today, the week in review, there's quite a few stories that we're going to be covering. So as I normally do, I go through tweets or on my Twitter feed. So let me bring that up. And we're going to start off by this story about the Peru alien attacks taking on added mystery because it's found out that US troops and special forces have been arriving in Peru since the middle of the year to prop up the unpopular right-wing government, and that the mysterious alien attacks began around the same time. So, this is circumstantial evidence supporting the false flag alien attack theory, because as we know, there are quite a few people that have talked about false flag attacks typically being preceded by a government or military exercise of some sort. So this is an article in Counterpunch that talks about the implications of the new US troop arrivals in Peru. So the troops began arriving in early June. On July 11 was when the alien attacks began, and we'll be looking at a little bit more about the involvement of the US military forces in the alien attacks. So the major media, after putting out stories saying that these alien attacks happened in Peru, the major media then shifted tack and started putting out information that this attack or these series of attacks involving 7-foot-tall aliens actually involved miners, gold miners with jetpacks. And the problem is that jetpacks are very, very loud, and the villagers didn't describe the aliens as being loud in any way, that they were silent, they were stealthy, and they were shot at point blank range. So even if miners were involved using some kind of technology like jetpacks, how do you explain them being shot at point blank range and no effect? I mean, that was what was reported by these Peruvian villagers. So to me, this looks like a clumsy cover-up attempt is now underway, but the official media is, for the moment, is running with that narrative. So the Peru prosecutor, and so here's an example in the New York Post, the Peru prosecutor, we're probably talking about their attorney general, accuses illegal gold mining gangs of posing as 7-foot aliens to terrorize villagers. So now, apparently this does happen in Peru, that villagers often are terrorized or intimidated by miners or loggers wanting to get access to the land. But really, as I said, people being able to get around, flying around. I mean, the villagers described these aliens as actually possessing some kind of shoe with a red disc under it. That's very different to some kind of jetpack. And of course, as I said, being shot point blank, I mean, that's not technology that can easily be used. Well, there's no real technology we know for people other than bulletproof vests, but even then, there would be an effect. The person would reel, or that would go back if they were hit point blank by shotguns and rifles. So that Peru alien attack, definitely, it still has not been explained. Here's an interview that came out on Monday, August 14. This is where I got to interview a veteran UFO researcher, Paola Harris, who's been interviewing people and doing UFO research since 1979. So she's been in the field for 44 years now. And she got to meet with Colonel Corso when he did his very first conference after the release of his famous book, The Day After Roswell, that came out in 1997. And she was at the Roswell UFO crash conference in Roswell, New Mexico in July of 1997. And she was one of the very few that got to meet and interview Colonel Corso, because she's Italian. She has Italian ancestry. And Colonel Corso is also Italian, also spent time in Italy. And so he was very interested in his information being put out to an Italian audience. And she came to Roswell on behalf of an Italian news journal. So, and as luck would have it, I mean, there is no such thing as luck. It's all synchronicity. Her room at the conference hotel was right next to Colonel Corso's. So that's how she got to meet him. She was actually in the adjacent room to him. So that's very interesting. And she was able to talk about him. And here's important, because as more and more whistleblowers come out with information on reverse engineering programs concerning extraterrestrial technologies, that means we've got to start paying attention to some of these older whistleblowers that were around 20, 30 years ago that were talking about the same thing. And of course, they were ridiculed and dismissed at the time. Now it turns out that they were revealing the truth. So definitely worth visiting the case of Col Philip Corso. And that interview, you can watch that on Exopolitics today. Now, when it comes to these special access programs that have been cited by people like David Grusch, saying that there's reverse engineering of alien technologies occurring, these are happening in these special access programs. Now, exactly what are special access programs? They are quite complex. There's both military and corporate versions of special access programs, because corporations have to adhere to military standards for a special access program. Otherwise, they won't get the funding. So this story that appeared on The Drive, it goes into detail about the history of special access programs, what is involved in them, and it is definitely well worth reviewing the origins of the special access programs. It's also important to understand the differences between unacknowledged and acknowledged special access programs. And finally, it is important to understand that the most highly classified of the special access programs are what is called a waived unacknowledged special access program, and that's where even the members of the intelligence committee that get to learn about these special access programs, or the defense committee within the US Congress, only the chairman and the ranking members are notified about these waived unacknowledged special access programs. There's no written records. So that's a great way of keeping it secret. So here you have in that article, they describe acknowledged special access programs here. And here you have unacknowledged special access programs, also known as USAPs. So definitely well worth reviewing that particular article. So, and one of the things that I found particularly helpful is there was an example of a non-disclosure agreement that was linked to in that article on the drive. And this is very helpful, even though it's a little blurred, you can't quite make it out, but the link is there in that article on the drive, and you can download it and expand it, and you can make it out. There's enough there, but it shows you just how stringent these non-disclosure agreements are, and why David Grusch, in his groundbreaking testimony before the House Oversight Committee on July 26, and prior to that, when he did a interview with an Australian journalist, Ross Coulthart, that was televised on News Nation, how he was very careful to say that he would not go beyond anything that he was already allowed to talk about through a review board that the Inspector General of the intelligence community had approved. In other words, he's allowed to talk about generalities when it comes to his knowledge and service, but he can't get too specific. Otherwise, he could be charged with releasing classified information to non-authorized persons, and this non-disclosure agreement spells that out. So now you will have a way of understanding why it is David Grusch was so specific in terms of things that he could talk about in general terms, but the specifics he could only disclose in a SCIF facility. That's a sensitive compartmented information facility, where those that are in that facility are allowed, or they have the clearance to hear the classified information that will be presented in that facility. And he was saying that he has the specific names of up to 40 individuals who could be whistleblowers, who could reveal what they know of these classified reverse engineering programs, that he could specifically name companies that are conducting these reverse engineering programs. And so he would only reveal those specifics in a SCIF facility. So now we understand why, based on this non-disclosure agreement that is pretty much similar to what David Grusch would have signed. So let's go now to this next story. Okay, all right. So here's an announcement for the Exopolitics Institute. That's a 501c3 organization that's been operating since 2006. So it has been in existence now for 17 years, and it has a number of programs. The one that is most relevant today is it has an Exopolitics diploma program where you can get an Exopolitics certificate or a diploma. And so that begins on September 4. And that is a place where you can actually get to do these different courses. And in the fall semester, there's a course, the Introduction to Exopolitics. That was a course I actually began teaching back around 2008, 2009. Now it's taught by Manuel Lemeroy, who's an excellent course instructor. EXO 106, that's Developing the Road to Disclosure. That's where Paola Harris, who I interviewed, she presents whistleblower testimony from people that she has actually interviewed physically. That she's one of the kind of old school researchers, where she will travel to meet with these whistleblowers and interview them. Today, of course, people use Skype and they do interviews long range remotely through Skype. But for people like Paola, she began with face-to-face meetings with people. And there's a new course, Xenomethodology towards a methodological framework for xenological and exopolitical sciences. So that's pretty much a methodological course. In other words, what is evidence? What is kind of like evidence that is something that is admissible or is genuine? And so it goes through the different ways in which data and sources can be examined and understood in terms of their evidentiary effect or importance. So definitely, if you're interested in getting up to speed with exopolitics, earning a certificate which will equip you for the future when this becomes mainstream, then you could take a look at the Exopolitics Institute's Exopolitics Certificate course that begins on September 4. So now we have a look at this intercept hit piece that was put out by a journalist on the Intercept. And what this Intercept article did was that it focused on David Grusch's difficulty he had back in 2014 and 2018. He had some difficulty with post-traumatic stress disorder. He was actually, let's just say, he had personal difficulties, alcohol, overuse of alcohol. He was kind of institutionalized for 24 hours. And so this Intercept article that came out basically focused on that. It presented the information that a Freedom of Information Act request was put in to various authorities in Virginia. The author of that Intercept article, he was given a tip. He was tipped off by some intelligence operatives for where to look. And so he was given that tip off. He looked he put in a FOIA request and got the information on David Grusch's episodes that involved law enforcement back in 2014. And Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, they put out this, let's say they did a session, one of their episodes on Weaponized, episode 30, The Empire Strikes Back. And I think that they're very accurate in terms of the sliming of David Grusch, that this was clearly an attempt to slime him, to discredit him. And the important thing that they pointed out is that in his original interview, David Grusch, I think it was a 7-hour interview that he did with News Nation, he pointed out that he did have issues with post-traumatic stress disorder, and he was an Afghanistan veteran, and his best friend committed suicide. Someone he served with committed suicide after coming back. And so that kind of like put him on that path. And I think there's a lot of people that would sympathize with him. So Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, they kind of like addressed that. And I think they got to the core of this issue. Why was this journalist, why did he run this piece? Well, he's a skeptic. He thinks that all this UFO stuff is nonsense or it's overblown. So fair enough. I mean, people have their own opinions, and I've run across enough skeptics in my 20 years of exopolitics research to know that you can have skeptics that are open-minded, that they don't believe you, but they're looking at your material, and they can be fair-minded. But this particular skeptic, I mean, he was tipped off. He was given a tip to find this dirt on David Grusch, and I think Corbell and Knapp hit it on the head. They said that, well, firstly, this was clearly an attempt to slime David Grusch. There was no real upside to this because there's no question about him not having the credentials or the the necessary knowledge to be able to do his job well and to be able to have a top secret security clearance. I mean, his superiors were in favor of that. So that wasn't a real issue. It was really just kind of like a hit piece. But I think the real issue here is that this hit piece was designed to warn off other whistleblowers. And I think that's where Corbell and Knapp hit the nail on the head, that it wasn't so much to stop David Grusch, because he's already committed, he's already on the path, he's testified before Congress, he's not going to back out of this. But the real goal was to intimidate other whistleblowers and say, look, if you come forward, this is what's going to happen to you. And I think they're correct. That's exactly what that hit piece in the Intercept was doing. And they also pointed out the irony of the Intercept that was created by Glenn Greenwald as a result of the Snowden disclosures about the NSA wiretapping, so that the Intercept was originally set up to protect whistleblowers coming forward to reveal information. And so here the Intercept has been used to actually attack and discredit whistleblowers. So it shows you that Glenn Greenwald made the right decision to distance himself from the Intercept. So they've obviously doing things that are not in alignment with their original mission. So here we are. This is Saturday, Saturday, August 19. So today, later on, there will be my next webinar on a worldwide UFO disclosure in the closing months of 2023. So a lot of things are going to be happening as we approach the end of summer. You're going to have the summer recess ending for Congress. They're going to come back. Congress is going to move forward in passing its legislature, groundbreaking legislation like the UAP Disclosure Act for 2023 that is going to set up a review board in the National Archives that is going to look at all UFO records that are older than 25 years in terms of releasing them to the general public, and the president will play a role in that process, which is unprecedented. This UAP Disclosure Act also asserts eminent domain over any extraterrestrial technologies. So that means that corporations that have been sitting on these technologies, and we know the specifics of which corporations are doing it. David Grusch is going to be revealing some of those specifics and the different program names. So that means that these corporations will be obliged by law to release all records on their reverse engineering projects, and any records older than 25 years are subject to automatic declassification. So it's going to be really incredible as that legislation is passed. And there are more things coming up in the latter parts of 2023. I've talked about my U.S. Army insider source, JP, having returned from a mission to an Atlantic space ark, and he says a crystal jewel was taken from that ark, and that is going to be used, or is being used as we speak, to activate other space arks. So the space arks are being activated, and there is definitely a disclosure plan in operation, and so I'll be talking about that. All right, so now we move to this interview I did with Timothy Alberino that came out on Thursday, August 17. And Timothy Alberino, this is my third interview with Timothy, and he is very knowledgeable about Peru. He spent over 10 years in Peru, living and working in the Amazon basin, and he got to become very familiar with this area where this attack took place. He says while he's not knowledgeable or hasn't directly communicated or seen the Iquitu villages where these alien attacks took place, he's very familiar with this area where the attacks took place, and he speaks the the particular dialect of Spanish that are used by these villagers in the Amazon. So very, very interesting. And his view, his conclusion after looking at all of the data, the villagers' first-hand testimony, because he's able to hear them in their original language and he's hearing what they're saying. And he says it's very clear that they were seeing aliens. They were seeing very tall extraterrestrials that had these advanced technologies. And so he is believing that this is involving genuine aliens. Now, the question, though, is these genuine aliens are part of a false flag operation. I mean, that's the challenge here, because we know that the US has been conducting military exercises in the region, and that, as I mentioned earlier, military exercises often precede a false flag attack. So the alien attacks happened in Peru after the US military, even Space Force, began conducting operations in Peru. So very, very interesting scenario. Now, what I think is going on is that I believe this is a false flag event being prepared involving genuine or reverse, or so we say, cloned aliens, or maybe synthetic programmed life forms, as Stephen Greer talks about it, that this is very likely involving some genuine aliens that are part of the kind of underground civilizations or part of the dumb facilities, and that the dumb facilities are where sometimes you have these tall grey aliens or other very tall aliens that are involved in certain operations on the surface of the planet. And so I think that you can still have a number of these negative aliens, whether they're tall greys or others, involved in these kinds of incidents. And I mentioned various whistleblowers or insiders, such as Stephen Chua, a Singaporean super soldier, who said he was sent to various areas where these alien attacks would often occur, and they would involve children. Now, this doesn't mean, though, that negative extraterrestrials, when we're talking about Draco reptilians or we're talking about Orion greys, are still in our solar system. And I think it's perfectly consistent with information that I've been putting out over the last year and a half from multiple sources, not just one. There's, of course, Elena Denan, Alex Collier, and other sources. John Peterson from the Arlington Institute has also cited multiple sources saying the same thing, which is that negative extraterrestrial groups have been forced to leave our solar system and the positives are left. Now, that, to me, what that means is that the off-world fleets have left. But those negative extraterrestrials, who in a sense aren't really extraterrestrials, because they've been resident on Earth for a long, long time. They've been living in dumb facilities, or they're part of these inner Earth civilizations. They've been here a long, long time. They can still be doing these kinds of attacks. Or it could be some cloned synthetic life form that the deep state has brought forward to be part of a false flag attack. So that's what I think is happening with the alien attacks in Peru. Okay, so here's an article that has been published on medium.com. I know Sergio Lub. He's someone that has been researching the UFO phenomenon for several decades now. And he is noticing the narrative shift that many others have also noticed, the UAP narrative. Previously, anyone talking about UFOs, they were in the official media. It was, you would have like the X-Files music playing, and the hosts doing the interview would often make jokes and kind of like it would always be done in a dismissive way. So if you were called to an interview, if you're a UFO researcher and you're called to do an interview on a major news network, X-Files music would play, the hosts would make jokes, and it would always be kind of like presented in a way that this is a fringe field and it's a curious phenomenon, but not something to be taken seriously. Now it's changed. Now UFO researchers that go onto these major networks, they're being treated seriously. This information is considered a national security threat. So the dialogue has shifted, and that's by design. Prior to 2017, which is when the New York Times posted its famous article along with Politico, revealing the existence of this advanced aerial threat identification program headed by Luis Elizondo. Ever since that time, the UFO issue has been redefined, recast as a serious national security threat. Prior to 2017, it was always treated in that way. So now that, to me, has laid the foundation for a false flag alien event, if it's going to happen. Now, the deep state wants, I've done a webinar on this in the past, the deep state definitely has the wherewithal to conduct a false flag alien invasion or an event. But the problem for the deep state is that too many people know about it. If they tried to pull off something like that in the United States or Britain or Europe, too many people would be prepared. So, but in order to lay the foundations for a false flag alien event to be taken seriously, to be accepted, you first have to redefine the UFO issue. So this is where the UAP narrative shift becomes important. And I think Sergio Lub did a good job in explaining this narrative shift that has occurred. So now it's occurred. People in the mainstream are taking the UFO issue seriously. So the foundation has been laid. Now, but for the deep state, their problem is, well, if they go ahead and do a false flag event in the United States or Europe, will the public believe it? And I think that they probably have good reason to suspect that it'd be very unlikely that the public would swallow that. But if you did it in a place like Peru, where the public thinks very, very differently, there the public is well aware of negative extraterrestrials. And so, they probably would be much more likely that the general public there would believe it. So that would be why I think you could probably have this UFO threat taking place, or this false flag event could take place in a place like Peru. All right, so now we move on. Okay, this was a very interesting article that came out on Space News. It involves the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, DARPA, putting together a study to integrate lunar infrastructure. So it explains how over the next decade, by the year 2035, so DARPA announced a 10-year architecture plan, Lunar 10, seeking ideas from both potential developers of lunar power communications and other infrastructure, as well as users of such capabilities. So DARPA is going to come up with this framework for integrating all of the projects, all of the resources on the moon. And so why would the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency be doing this? Well, clearly, the moon will be treated as a high ground in terms of a potential military struggle in the future. So if the moon is the strategic high ground, then for a future military or a space military defense of the Earth, or for any kind of military defense, then you want to integrate everything that is up there. And so they're starting that process. And I think what is really happening is that, of course, this space news story is predicated on the idea that, well, over the next 10 years, up until 2035, all of these missions are going to be going to the moon, SpaceX, Blue Origins, all of these private companies and Artemis Accords are going to become the framework for many countries cooperating in lunar projects and deep space projects, that by 2035, you're going to have a need for kind of integrating everything up there. Well, as we know, as my Secret Space Program book series and others have been talking about for the last decade now, there's secret space programs in existence with bases, multiple bases on the moon. And these already exist. So the goal is to integrate all of these and to disclose their existence to the general public over the years ahead, make it look like these are new things, but in fact, these lunar facilities have been up there for a long time. So I think that's what's really going on with DARPA being involved in this. And it's really, while the Artemis Accords are civilian, I think it's very clear that the military sees the moon as the strategic high ground, kind of like the Hawaiian Islands are the strategic high ground for the defense of the Pacific Ocean. And so you look at the Hawaiian Islands, they just, especially Oahu, is just, filled to the brim with military facilities. And I think the moon, the same thing has happened up there. So that's the DARPA study. Okay, so here we have Robert Kennedy Jr. doing an interview with Tucker Carlson. And he is very vocal in his belief that the CIA assassinated his uncle, President Kennedy. And that this is why there are still 4,000 JFK documents that have still not been released. So it was in 1992 or 1993, as I recall, that President Bill Clinton signed new legislation that would have all of the Kennedy assassination documents released after 25 years. And so that 25 years elapsed in 2017 as Donald Trump began his presidency. And still the CIA objected to a lot of these, to thousands of pages being released. And so the National Archives have released tens of thousands of documents, but the most sensitive documents, the ones that really point the finger at the CIA being involved in the assassination of President Kennedy, have not been released. So there's 4,000 of those that haven't been released. And Robert Kennedy Jr., quite rightly, is pointing that out. So I think Kennedy is doing a great job in pointing out these the involvement of the CIA in the assassination and why it is that 4,000 files still haven't been released, and probably why, if he became president, why he would force the release of those files, and why he would be someone that the CIA fears greatly becoming president. Which it's not news that Robert Kennedy is being shunned by the Democratic Party, which is ironic that he's running for the Democratic primary and he has over 20% of primary voters supporting him, but the Democrats, the Democratic Party machine is shunning him, not giving him any exposure, any support, even denying him Secret Service protection. I mean, it's crazy that they're doing that to a man whose father was assassinated for running for the presidency, and he's following in his father's footsteps. Now, the only thing I would take issue with RFK is that I think that at some point he's going to have to start addressing the UFO issue when it comes to his father and his uncle being assassinated, because I know, and this is something Paola Harris knows from her interviews with Col Philip Corso. Colonel Corso, during the Kennedy administration, he was the head of the foreign technology desk at the for the U.S. Army, and he was looking at these technologies that had been recovered from the Roswell crash and deciding which technology could be released to a corporation that was doing work in that area to help them speed up their development. So, for example, if a corporation was working along the lines of some kind of night vision technology, he would hand over the lens from the aliens recovered from the Roswell crash that would enable them to see in the dark. So he would pass that onto the company, and that company would then analyze that technology and be able to come up with night vision technology. And that's exactly what happened. And so the same thing with Kevlar material, with fiber optics and so forth, that this was all seeded. And Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General Robert Kennedy, was being briefed by Philip Corso on this effort to disseminate technologies recovered from the Roswell crash to US industries. So Robert Kennedy was then briefing his brother about this because Kennedy Sr. had been denied access to classified UFO files. So that's something I talk about in my book. I wrote a book in 2000 that came out in 2013 called Kennedy's Last Stand. And there I present all of the data. There's a lot of documents showing that Kennedy did have this struggle against the CIA and Alan Dulles in particular, the director of the CIA during the Kennedy administration, the first director, that Kennedy had problems trying to get access to classified UFO files. So that is a direct factor in the Kennedy assassination, and I think RFK at some point is going to have to start addressing that issue, and I think it's going to come out eventually. So looking forward to that. So here's something that I found very fascinating. This was something that was sent to me. It appeared in a Twitter feed, and it shows a picture of these UFOs entering into space-time portals. And I think that's very, very important to know, that extraterrestrials travel to our solar system not necessarily because they've mastered superluminal travel and they have tachyon drives and so forth. A tachyon is a theoretical particle that can travel faster than the speed of light. That's possible, but according to contactees, a lot of extraterrestrials travel to our solar system using portals, space-time portals. So it's like you use these portals, and it's like, look at it as a kind of dial almost. You just factor in not just the location, but also the time. So you can say, for example, you're part of the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and your home is actually somewhere in the Pleiades, and you live 200 years in the future of the present time. So that's where you live, that's where your family is, and your day job is, or you come here to Earth to participate in these Galactic Federation of Worlds meetings or missions. And so you go through one of these space-time portals and you teleport here, or you come through the portal and here you are, 200 years in your past, or our present, and that distance from the Pleiades. So how many light years is that? I can't remember off the top of my head how many light years that is. Several dozen, I assume. So very interesting. I think that is pretty much the way extraterrestrials travel interstellar different distances, that they understand the secrets of space-time portals and how to travel interstellar distances using these. That those that travel using a linear method, this is something that's very old technology. Certainly you could actually speed up your travel. You could develop superluminal travel. So let's just say you go 10 times the speed of light. So it takes 4 years to get to Alpha Centauri. So you travel 10 times the speed of light to get to Alpha Centauri. So that would still take you 0.4 years. So what are we talking about there? That's about 4 months. Let's just say it's 4 months to travel to Alpha Centauri. And that's still quite a long time. Whereas if you use space-time portal. Rather than taking 4 months to get there, it will take you 4 minutes or 4 hours. Obviously, space-time portals, that's the way the most advanced extraterrestrials travel. But those that are still going through their evolution, they are probably having to develop more advanced technologies to be able to get to this level. Now, the interesting thing about this tweet showing how you can actually have spacecraft traveling through space-time portals is that it refers to the MH370 video. So that's from Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 that disappeared, I think it was 2014. And it's referring to alleged videos that have just recently appeared that are getting a lot of attention on on Reddit. And so I thought I would show this video so you can see what the fuss is all about. So here you can see this UFO. Here we go. You're seeing this this UFO here traveling around. There you go. You see the UFO traveling around, and now you see 3 smaller. Well, there'll be 3 at the end. 3 traveling around it. Traveling around, supposedly MH370. This is how supposedly it disappeared. Traveling around it, and it then disappears, like going through a portal. Okay, let's see it disappearing. So they're going around it. And there you go. It just disappeared. So this has got a lot of people in Reddit fascinated. Is this how Malaysian Airlines 370 was disappeared? And it's going on, showing it all in slow motion now. But I think it's a very interesting video. What I want to say is that now it's quite possible that Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 was somehow teleported or taken away from its original flight line through a portal that was created in front of it by these UAPs. Now, I don't know the origin of this video. I don't know if it's if it is something that is using CGI. It could be just something that is being leaked. Okay, again, you saw it at slow motion as it disappears into this space-time portal. Fascinating how that has happened. Now, it is very interesting. This is footage apparently from a Reaper drone. So there you saw the portal. Oh, so when I say a drone, it wasn't a Reaper drone. It was some sort of other drone. So that is very interesting, showing, and this is why some user put together this diagram illustrating how a spacecraft uses these space-time portals and how it can manifest those. So it's feasible that extraterrestrial spacecraft can generate one of these and have a civilian airline craft go through it, being transported to somewhere else. Now, the interesting thing is, where was it transported to? Was it transported off planet? Was it transported to a remote location on planet? Some people say that the Malaysian Airlines flight was transported to Diego Garcia. There have been more than one person has said that that's Diego Garcia was where it was taken. And I did an interview, several interviews with Mark Domizio, who says that he actually was taken to the surface of the Diego Garcia military base, and he was told to assassinate, that he was tasked to assassinate and kill some of the people that were dismantling the rear portions of the plane to be then distributed elsewhere to make it look like the plane had crashed. Now, it's important to point out that Mark Domizio says that he's and this involved a cloned version of him. It's a very fascinating story. You can go to my interview with Mark Domizio on Exopolitics Today to find out the specifics of that. But he says that his clone eliminated the construction crew, or the crew that was disassembling the aircraft. He did not see the actual crew of Malaysian Airlines 370 or the passengers. He doesn't know what happened to them. So very interesting that particular airline was discovered or seen at Diego Garcia 2014 by Mark Domizio. Now, that would suggest that if some kind of space-time portal was used, that was used to transport it to Diego Garcia. So very interesting. We hopefully will find out more because, as I mentioned, there is going to be some really amazing disclosures that are going to be happening in the months ahead. Now, so those are the stories. So I think we are looking at really major developments happening in the weeks and months ahead. I'll be covering them in my Exopolitics Week in Review, my webinars. If you're watching this today, August 19, the webinar will be held at 2 p.m. today, so you could register for that, and you could learn more about what is exactly going to be coming over the next few months of 2023, and as we enter into 2024. So I want to thank you for watching the Week in Review. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Exopolitics Today. So I look forward to talking to you again next week.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.